raging across different parts of the country, people were saying, look, results of global warming. But now that we have a record cold snap and the entire country is in its grip, now you've got the same people saying, well, it is still climate change. Is it? Is it really climate change? Is that what we're experiencing? Or is it that they don't have a way of explaining what most of us clear thinking, commonsensical type folks call weather? It's weather. The entirety of the climate science, it's like a romanticized religion where people believe that if I just make my carbon footprint smaller, I'll have an impact on the weather that encompasses the entire globe. 1 or 2 or 1,000 Americans. We have the cleanest country on the planet as it pertains to burning fossil fuels, renewable resources, recycling, and our energy production. We're the leader. We're the gold standard. Other countries have put off meeting standards that we met 10 and 20 years ago on pollution, and they've done that because they can't meet the standards that we're currently operating under. And what are we doing? We have our elected officials in Washington, D.C. actually trying to make our standards even more stringent. So stringent that they're choking off business, choking off job creation, choking off industries, entire industries. Just looking at how many coal businesses like Arch Coal, Peabody Energy, how many of those companies still exist after the reign of terror visited upon them by the Obama administration? And I'm sorry, guys, I have a demon printer. It's not printing when I try to print stuff out. And then later, it just starts printing like old stuff. I think that's from yesterday that I tried to print. It's unbelievable. So I maybe need to get rid of that printer. But it costs too much, so I can't do that. Anyway, so this is the problem. The other problem is that the media very carefully cultivates climate scientists to come on their programs that agree with their narrative. The Democrats, global warming, climate change, climate science, the redistribution of wealth from high producing nations like the United States into lower producing countries that will never, ever meet the goals that we surpassed 40 or 50 years ago for clean energy. Countries that still dump their manufacturing waste and human waste into their waterways. I mean, we're talking about some really backward third world type stuff. And they're saying, we'll sign on to the Paris Climate Accord because they got nothing to lose. They know they're never going to meet the standards that we've set for advanced countries. They're still in the developing bloc. So they're only in the Paris Climate Accord and all these different groups. They're only signing on to these things because they get money. Because what happens is America will say, well, we're going to set this new standard. And then we set the new standard. We can't meet it. So if we don't meet it, even if we do, we have payments that have to be made from the American people to the UN or the Paris Climate Accord. And then they take that money and skim off the top, just like regular old gangsters. And then they take the rest of it and parse it out to developing countries. And those developing countries don't then take that money and put it into a fund earmarked for clean energy or cleaning up waste sites or sewage treatment or anything. No, the despots that run those countries use that to pad their coffers. They hire more security. They remodel their palaces. They buy jets and yachts and, cars, whatever they want to buy to make themselves more comfortable. They pay off their political enemies and their friends. And then the people who live in those countries, they don't see any changes at all. It's not like every time we sign on to one of these agreements or accords, which are unconstitutional because they're governed by the UN and we have one individual signing on to them. They're never brought up for a vote by the Congress, which is our representation. And so instead of that happening, what they're doing is of course they're signing on. They want to be in the Paris Climate Accords. They want to be in these accords, whatever you call them. They don't care where they're created because they want some of that money from America for themselves. And even the more developed countries stand in line to get money from America. So the whole point of having the entire thing stems on America paying out multiple billions of dollars and slowing our economy down because we can afford it, and everybody else standing in line with their little buckets out to receive our tax dollars. And so it's no wonder that this gentleman, founder of the Weather Channel, got on here onto CNN and just lit into Brian Stelter like nobody's business. It's no wonder. So I'm very hopeful that more people with power and influence, more people who have credibility will come out and be strong advocates against this. It's like a sickness that has infected the Democrats, where even if you're sitting around just watching a movie with a bunch of people, has nothing to do with politics, the minute they show a natural disaster in the movie, someone will say, well, that's what's going to happen to us if climate change goes through. Normal, highly intelligent people with advanced educations, turn into bumbling dunderheads when they see a natural disaster on TV because they think that's definitely going to happen to us if we don't get back into the Paris Climate Accord. Well, if that's the case, why don't we have an accord on hurricanes? Why don't we have an accord on other catastrophic natural disasters? Why don't we have a wildfire accord? If all we have to do is take money from American taxpayers and shell it out to developing nations to stop wildfires, why haven't we done that? I'll tell you why. The same reason why we haven't passed a gun law yet that stops homicidal maniacs. That doesn't mean they're crazy, like mentally unstable. It means they believe in killing people and they go about doing whatever they need to do it. Same reason why we don't have any laws that have currently prevented homicidal maniacs from waging mass shooting attacks, driving trucks into buildings, driving trucks into people. Anybody who has that kind of evil in their heart and they want to do it, they're not going to stop and say, let me check the Federal Register of Laws before I do that. By the same token, we don't have weather patterns stopping to make a quick perusal of what accords we've signed on to before raining down natural disasters on us. There are just some things we can't control. Now, if you're a Christian, you're like, yeah, God is in control. And this is the result of living in a fallen world. And this is where we are. This is what it is. We have to pray. We have to live. We have to number our days. We have to think, be grateful for when we don't have these disasters and we have these cold snaps, nationwide cold snaps. We have to make sure. I mean, I went for 7 days without leaving the house. I just left the house again on Sunday. And I might go for another 7 days. We'll see. Without leaving these walls. Because I can tell you one thing I hate. It's super, super cold. When it's down in the zeros and 1 degrees, I'm like, I don't need anything that badly. And now that there's Amazon with 2-day delivery, it's almost as if I go ahead and order it when I think about it, by the time I think about it again, it's already on my doorstep. So, I'm really interested to see how many other business leaders would go about getting themselves booked onto CNN and then taking someone to task the way this gent did with Brian Stelter. It's not only courageous, it's important because we need people like that to do the hard work of educating the American people in spite of what we're seeing from, who do we call this? It's just these media malpractice hacks. So now I want to turn over to a kind of a funny story that was from yesterday. It's about this Jeopardy contestant. So if you've been alive in America for the past 20 years or so, you know about the game show Jeopardy. And this Jeopardy contestant lost $3,200 for pronouncing the word gangster properly instead of pronouncing it gangsta with an A. Now, this is just to go to show you how far pop culture has completely permeated our existence. You've got Alex Trebek, and there are 3 contestants on the show, and they're in the category music, literature, before and after. And he gets prompted with the answer, a song by Coolio from Dangerous Minds goes back in time to become a 1667 John Milton classic. So the answer to that, the question to that answer, refers to Paradise Lost, and the song is Gangsta's Paradise, which is spelled on the album and everywhere that it's printed with an A. So Nick, one of the contestants who was in the lead at the time, responded with Gangsta's Paradise Lost, which was the correct answer, and he was given $1,600. on his little, on his little blue screen. Well, then next, Alex Trebek moves forward, with the next, you get to ring in and read another answer, and then you pose the question. Except then Trebek had the unfortunate task of basically breaking the news to Nick Speicher that the judges were reviewing his response and they found it to be incorrect. So they penalized him the $1,600 plus another $1,600 because you know how it is with this game. The money rolls up as you're playing. So Alex Trebek told him, our judges have reevaluated one of your responses from a few minutes ago, Nick. You said gangster instead of gangsta on that song by Coolio, so we take $3,200 from you. You're now in second place. They posted a note on their website, the game show Jeopardy, and they said that it turns out that gangsta and gangster are both listed separately in the Oxford English Dictionary, each with its own unique definition. Nick changed not only the song's title, but also its meaning, making his response unacceptable. So Coolio, the actual singer and author of the song, told TMZ that this should be a lesson to white people that the ER will always get you in trouble. Now, I'm not sure how funny you find that. I'm not sure if that's funny. But Nick Speicher actually is a museum educator from Everett, Washington, and he ended up winning the game anyway, despite the setback. So there you go. There's we don't really do a pop culture update on the show, but there it is. If there is a pop culture update, it's that I certainly didn't know until I saw this story that gangsta and gangster, I knew they had different meanings, streetwise in the vernacular, but I didn't know they were in the Oxford Dictionary, and I didn't know that the definitions delineated them to such a degree that it would cost you money on Jeopardy. So there you go. So I want to kind of give you a preview for next segment. We are actually going to do our encouragement next segment. We're going to talk about, we're going to continue on our vein of all things new. And we are also going to be taking your calls. So if you'd like to call in and tune into the show, get onto the air, chat with me, whether you agree or disagree, your calls are welcome. And the lines are 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037. It gives you some time over the break to call in. Let our call screener know what it is that you want to share with us. And I'll be taking your calls next segment along with our encouragement segment. So good to be with you. StacyOnTheRight.com is the website where you can hit the subscribe button. And we'll be right back with more after these messages.
John 1:1 says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Remember in the Word when Jesus was responding to Satan's antics? When Satan was trying to tempt Jesus with food, Jesus responded with himself. He responded with the Word. There are no new tricks in Satan's book. At the end of the day, his job is to create fear and doubt, and steal, kill, and destroy. So if Jesus, who is fully God, responded to Satan with the Word, why do we think that we can get along without the Word? The Bible says, study to show thyself approved. Equip yourself.
stool inclines to the left just kept popping into my mind.
Stacy on the Right. Now heard weekday afternoons from 2 to 4 Central on Urban Family Talk.
This is Life Issues with Brad Mattis, president of Life Issues Institute.
Less than a year and a half ago, Canada legalized euthanasia. They've already discussed whether or not patients with dementia should be killed, and now they're targeting children. Nearly half of the Canadian pediatricians who responded to a poll support euthanasia for children with progressive terminal illness or intractable pain. We've already seen phrases like this twisted to include a wide selection of patients. Many of these pediatricians said they've already had conversations with patients who are minors or their parents about euthanasia. Dr. Don Davies, head of the Canadian Pediatric Society's Bioethics Committee, said doctors should start thinking about when euthanasia would be a more compassionate choice. Killing a child is never a compassionate choice.
Like us on Facebook at Life Issues and stay informed, more informed than you've ever been.
Yeah, we are the colors outside of the lines, and we paint a picture.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Stacy on the Right. Call lines are open at 866-963-2037. And you can go to urbanfamilytalk.com and afr.net. Those are the websites. You can hit those up, see all the great content. Share it. Put it on Facebook if you have that, or Twitter, whatever you've got. Put it up there. Let's do it. So right now I want to go into our encouragement. And we just have such a great opportunity, no matter what our circumstances are, because of the ability to pray for wisdom, that God will give us wisdom in certain situations. And so, you know, we don't always realize we're not being wise in a situation, but if we do see it as an opportunity and we say, hey, I want to be more wise in this area, God answers those prayers. He wants to make us more wise. And so one of the things that I'm really excited about is whenever oh, you know what? I lack wisdom in this area. Lord, please give me some wisdom in this area. And he always answers. So one of the things that you can find in Ephesians, it's Ephesians 5, verses 15 through 21. And they say, be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is. Do not get drunk on wine, which leads to debauchery. Instead, be filled with the Spirit, speaking to one another with psalms, hymns, and songs from the Spirit. Sing and make music from your heart to the Lord, always giving thanks to God the Father for everything. In the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. So I guess you start off with the basics. You might be asking yourself, I know I certainly, when I was thinking through this, one of the first questions that sprung to mind is, have I ever done things that I would now term as unwise? And the answer to that is obviously yes, I have. So, and that might be even politely stated. Have you ever acted a fool? The answer, yes. Okay. So we know that there's a God. We know he exists. And if you're watching the show and you're an atheist and you don't believe that God exists, that's your prerogative. But I'm speaking from the perspective of someone, I know God exists. And I believe that, and I have assurances of that, and the proof of his existence is all around me in my everyday world. All things speak to the glory of their creator, which is God. So that's a whole nother conversation, and maybe we will one day when I feel like I'm comfortably able to do so in a proper manner, go over some of the proofs and all of that. But for here, we know there's a God. We all know we will be judged at the end. So that's for the believers, the non-believers, anybody who's around, everyone is going to be judged at the end. We know that there are forces constantly at work trying to hinder our spiritual lives and lead us in ways that are unwise, foolish ways. And so we kind of are left almost wishing, I guess, that someone divinely inspired by God would give us some clear and practical advice on how to avoid these unwise things that we might get caught up in. We need to walk wisely through this life. So look at the Bible. Paul, you are an apostle, divinely inspired. What should we think of? What might we concentrate on so that we might live our lives wisely? In Ephesians 5:15, the apostle does just that. He relates to Christians several categorical items to focus on if we are to walk wisely through this life. So this isn't a foolproof, action plan that prevents you from ever making a mistake or ever being foolish. In fact, what'll happen is you'll realize when you're being foolish or when you're not being wise. It will be more readily apparent to you if you focus on this, but it doesn't prevent you from making mistakes. Making mistakes is a part of being alive. But you will be more, oh my goodness, that wasn't the wisest decision that I made. And so then you have to kind of deal with the ramifications. So the first thing the apostle urges on Christians in an attempt to live wisely involves making the most of our time. And this is such a timely thing for us to address ourselves to. Ephesians 5:16 says, making the most of your time because the days are evil, because it's the beginning of the year. And I was watching this video by, I think her name's Jordan Patterson. I'll have to see if I can find it again later. She's this frugal home living expert. And I stumbled onto her videos looking up keto compliant recipes on YouTube. And she was in one of the, you might like this, they put the little suggestions underneath. And so I clicked on it and she talked about how she and her husband, they both did the video together, how they planned their entire year out. They use Google Calendar. They sit down and they plan out each month. And so they take their kids' multiple school calendars and they download those. And then they schedule in things like, one I found interesting was they don't have any family living locally in town. So they found that over the years, the more children they had, now they have 5, the less time they spent reaching out to their relatives. So the kids weren't getting to know the relatives except on the, once a year trips around the holidays. And it was making a real negative impact on them. So what she said they decided to do was to make Sunday night, they Skype with one family member. So they get all of the kids around the laptop. They Skype into that family member, where there's grandparents on her side or his side, her sister, her brother, whatever. It's a relative, and they Skype to that family member. And she said it has really just expanded in an amazing way their connectivity to their family. And when they see them on the once a year, whatever it is, the trips, it's not like strangers meeting where the first 3 days, everybody's kind of like circling around each other. Like, I know we're related, and you're kind of gingerly hugging. She said it really facilitated them having closer relationships, and they've been doing it for a while now. And so I was watching that and thinking, the first thing that struck me was, because I do plan things out and I will say, okay, next year, what week are we taking a family trip? And then you start working your way back from that to book, hotel, or if you're staying in a condo or whatever you're doing, and how are you getting there? Are you flying? You're driving? What are you doing? And so when the kids were smaller, we had to plan it out a lot more carefully. But now that they're older, it's much more who's got camp what weeks, and then what week are we taking vacation? And then, but to plan each month out and to go down to the weekly level, her husband chimed in that he puts in a bunch of different information about the holidays, because without it, he wouldn't remember to get something in advance of Mother's Day, to get something in advance of her birthday, to start like dropping hints and figuring out what would she really like for her birthday, that type of thing. And so he talked about that. She talked about planning out the stuff that all moms have to deal with the working out of the schedules for pediatrician visits, dental visits, et cetera, et cetera. So they sit down and do this together at the beginning of the year, every single year. And then they sit down monthly and look at the calendars to kind of update and adjust based on new information. Now, these two are obviously, they have a whole YouTube empire around frugal living, saving money, parenting, cooking, household organization. She even has a series of videos on laundry, because with 5 kids, she does an amazing amount of laundry, and she doesn't sort by color. She sorts by clothing texture. I mean, obviously I left the first video about the organization and I was fascinated. And of course they had other videos of hers that sprung up. And so I watched like parts of 3 other videos. This woman is running an empire for a reason. She's amazingly organized. But one of the things that kind of drew me back to this is the Bible says we are to make the most of our time because the days are evil. The Bible calls the days short. The Bible calls our days like grains of sand that, they're quickly through the hour. I mean, it's just, and there are many, many references in the Bible to how our days on this earth are almost like wheat that dries up and blows away. It's grass that blows away. So that means we don't have a lot of time to waste. One of my little inspirational quotes for this year has to do with you only get so many days. So when you waste one, you can't get it back. And really, that all goes along with this Bible verse, Ephesians 5:16, make the most of your time because the days are evil. So how much time do you have? Worst case scenario, a person drops dead before the end of this day, accidents happen, and that's it. That's all the days he had. Jesus talks of a man who spent so much time focused on prosperity in Luke 12, verses 20 through 21, that he had to build bigger barns. But God said to him, you fool, this very night your soul is required of you, and now who will own what you have prepared? So is a man who stores up treasure for himself and is not rich towards God. That refers, of course, to being obedient, paying our tithes, giving our time and our resources to our local church house, etc. So best case, that's the worst case, is that, your soul is required of you this evening. The best case is you hope for 85. You look at the longevity reports for Americans. They're living on average 10 years past the median, which used to be 73. So you can say maybe 85 if you spend, some time every day walking, you eat healthy, and, you're not a heavy drinker, and you're blessed, then sure, 85. If this is true, then I've already spent about half of what I've got. So my time, your time, all of our time is a very limited and valuable commodity, and we have to invest it wisely. So what are some of the ways that we waste our time? Well, I could spend a whole lot of your time right now listing all the ways that I waste time, but suffice it to say, we all know how we waste time. That's not even worth us delving into. What influences our soul during our idle times? Do we spend too much time on Facebook, television, hobbies, music? And these things are good for us in moderation based on our desires, but are they good for our soul? Or are they worse than a waste, a destructive influence to our actual godliness? So I want to kind of wrap this, because we're going to come back to this. We're going to have the rest of this on Thursday and Friday, because it's so important. I didn't feel like we could do we couldn't get to all of it in one encouragement. So we'll cover it again for a few minutes on tomorrow's show, and then again for a few minutes on Friday's show. So that's the good news, is that we'll be able to finish this out. And I'll watch a few more of the videos from the couple, and I'll post one of their videos on my Facebook page so you can see what I'm talking about. They're really an outstanding couple. I'm sure they have their foibles, their faults. They're not perfect, but they're very organized and in a freakish kind of a way. And I guess they have to be with, 5 children and all the different things that they do. But it's kind of inspirational. It's a little intimidating, but it's kind of inspirational to watch them and to kind of see what they're doing, and then to kind of, well, so what am I doing? There are some things that I'm very organized about, and there are other things that I feel like I'm flying by the seat of my pants, and I'm wrestling those things constantly to the ground. And those are areas, of course, that I want to focus on and get them more under control, because the time is short. And so these are all personal. It's really, you know what your demon is, what your thing that you're wrestling with is, and the thing that is naturally an easy thing for you to do and get done and take care of. And I know women who are amazingly organized. One in particular I know who is almost like a machine, but the bad part is that she's also almost like a machine. So not a lot of fun there, but extremely organized and well controlled. So I'm not looking to go to that level of command and control, but I definitely want to address areas where I know I'm lacking. And to do that, obviously it's a desire of my heart, and it's given to me by God. And to do that, I can look at God's word, and He has resources for me. He's given me and you, He's given all of us all of these ways that we can use His word to help us accomplish these things, like not wasting our time, but using our time wisely, because the days are short, the days are evil. So the last little bit I'll cover here, what is the best and wisest use of time? There are always going to be forces trying to distract you, lead you off, preoccupy you so that you'll be corrupted by this generation, choked out by the cares and worries of this life so you fail in bringing honor, glory, and thanks and praise to the Creator. These things are always going to be around. Walking wisely means we consciously spend what little time we have on things beneficial to our souls, on things heaven bent, on things that nurture the Spirit of God in us. And we do that while we complete our work, while we're, changing diapers or running kids to and fro, while we're doing all of those things. Spending your time wisely doesn't mean to the exclusion of handling your duties and your responsibilities and your obligations. So the question that I'll leave you with for today, and it's for me as well, I was definitely feeling the conviction coming on. Do you let time drift, or do you wisely think about it with eternity in view? Your time is limited and a valuable commodity. Invest it and use it wisely. So that's something for us to ponder on and kind of consider. No condemnation, no judging, none of that stuff. More like, how can I encourage you and you encourage me to use my time more wisely? Because Ephesians 5:17 says, so then do not be foolish, but understand what the will of the Lord is. That's my fervent desire for myself, to understand the will of the Lord. And it's my fervent desire for you, that you would understand what the will of the Lord is for you, and that you'd be encouraged and made courageous and strong to be able to carry that out. So, okay, that's hour one. Hour two will be back in just a couple of minutes. I'm going to go fill up my little Vitamix coffee thing, and I'll be right back with you. Stay here for more Stacy on the Right.
Urban Family Talk.
I'm Will Addison, Director of Urban Family Talk. Our motto is truth, wisdom, and empowerment. We felt that this motto reflects what we want to be to the urban community. We ask God today to give our community wisdom from God, truth, which is Jesus Christ, and empowerment through the Holy Spirit as we seek to be the community that God has called the Black community to be. Stay connected at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. Winter weather is slamming into the East Coast as many southern states brace for the worst. Eben Brown has more.
They're expecting several inches of snow and high winds in coastal North Carolina.
As a result, there is a blizzard warning for the northeastern counties of Camden and Currituck.
Governor Roy Cooper, the freeze has already struck southern Georgia and northern Florida, where schools are closed. Nick Dombeck in Tallahassee got to watch his son Lucas play in the falling snow for the first time ever.
It wasn't a whole lot of snow, but, for a 5-year-old to go out there and see some snow living in Florida, it was really cool. It was really fun.
And Tallahassee saw about 1/10 of an inch this morning. In Miami, Eben Brown, Fox News.
An autopsy report shows a 3-year-old girl whose body was found in a culvert near her suburban Dallas home died from homicidal violence. Sharon Matthews, who was adopted in 2016 from an orphanage in India, had been missing for 2 weeks before her body was found in Richardson October 22nd. Stephen Kurtz with the Dallas County Medical Examiner's Office said today that Sharon was a victim of homicide, but that he couldn't provide any other details at this point. Alaska Airlines bans a man from future flights over a sexual harassment claim. Jeff Manasso has more.
53-year-old Mike Timon tells the San Diego Union Tribune that he's being accused of inappropriately touching a flight attendant on a trip from Portland to San Diego last week, saying he politely touched the woman on her back to get her attention, that he was immediately accused and later greeted by police and now banned on Alaska Airline flights. He denies any wrongdoing. Alaska Airlines is investigating and says it won't tolerate sexual misconduct that creates an unsafe environment for guests and crew members.
A man who was recently freed after being held hostage in Afghanistan now faces charges including sexual assault.
Joshua Boyle is expected in court today to face 15 charges, including forcible confinement, sexual assault, and administering a noxious drug. Boyle, who is Canadian, was freed in October along with his American wife and their children in Pakistan, 5 years after the couple was abducted by the Taliban while on a backpacking trip in neighboring Afghanistan. The children were born in captivity. The acts Boyle is accused of reportedly happened between October 14th and December 30th after the family returned to Canada. Tanya J. Powers, Fox News.
There was a 10% drop in the number of police officers killed in the line of duty in 2017.
Police officers from around the country came to San Antonio last July to pay their respects to Officer Miguel Moreno. He and his partner were shot by a suspected burglar while on patrol near San Antonio College. The partner survived, Moreno didn't. Mo, as his colleagues called him, was one of 128 officers killed in the line of duty in 2017, down 10% from the year before. Jim Pasco of the National Fraternal Order of Police is thrilled with the decline, but says there are some worrying trends out there.
Part of the backstory to last year was that there was a larger number of unprovoked ambush-type assaults on officers, some of which resulted in fatalities.
He says the narrative surrounding several high-profile police shootings has motivated some to take out their frustrations by violent attacks on the men and women in blue. But Pasco says the vast majority of Americans support the police, and they're starting to speak out.
People who thought that they'd been empowered somehow by the climate they found themselves in now find that that climate really hasn't changed. You're not a hero when you attack a police officer. You're a criminal.
Pasco says the long blue line will continue to protect and serve regardless of the danger. Mo's chief, William McManus, put it this way at Mo's funeral service.
To those who have disdain for or would advocate violence against police officers, I have a message for you. There will never be a legitimate reason that would justify such a warped point of view. We may not agree with what you're saying, but as officers, we'll put our lives on the line to defend your right to protest, even when you're protesting us.
I'm Steve Jordahl.
For American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh.
Abraham Hamilton III.
God put us in this world at this time to be salt and light. We don't fold because of the darkness that we're facing. This is not the first time in the world's history that it's gotten dark. God has called you and I to be his ambassadors, even in this dark moment.
Tune in to the Hamilton Corner, weekdays at 5 p.m. Central on Urban Family Talk. Welcome to Stacy on the Right with your host, Stacy Washington.
We have a graphic of all of the issues that you all have to tackle in the next couple of months. So we'll just go through it. The number one, pass the government spending bill, because this is the can that you guys are forever kicking down the road. And now you only have 2 weeks to keep the government running. Then, of course, there's what to do about the Dreamers. There's the president's infrastructure program that he sounds like he wants to tackle first. There's CHIP that protects the most vulnerable children in this country, that the president still wants to repeal Obamacare. Then there's what Paul Ryan has talked about, which is, reforming welfare and the entitlement programs. And then, of course, there's the midterm elections. Congressman, what do you want to do first?
Well, let's start. First things first is to fund the government. And frankly, the appropriators are pretty good at this. We did it in April, over $1 trillion bill, very bipartisan, and it has to be bipartisan. It takes 60 votes in the United States Senate passed a spending bill. So two parties have to work together. The first thing we need is for the president, the speaker, the majority leader, the two minority leaders to agree on what's called a top line number. After that, we break it into 12 different bills, and that's what funds the government. But they have to agree on the top line. They haven't been able to come to that agreement yet.
I mean, this is why optimism may be misplaced, because there are sticking points. There seem to be a lot of sticking points. So how are you all going to get on board?
Well, the big one is that there has to be something in it for everybody in what's a bipartisan deal. And the way forward's pretty obvious. The Republicans want to do a major defense buildup. Actually, both parties voted for that in the National Defense Authorization Act. So there's going to be more money there above the cap level. And the Democrats want in exchange for that to get more money on the non-defense side of discretionary spending. So that's the deal. They just have to decide what the appropriate amounts are. And again, the appropriators know how to get this done pretty quickly once there's an agreement at the top. So the two parties are actually used to working together in the appropriations process, but leaders have to agree to allow appropriators to do their job.
Wow. So that was a mouthful. That was GOP Representative Tom Coyle. He's talking to Allison Camerata on CNN, and she's all fired up about this huge list of things that the Republicans are going to have to get done in 2018. She doesn't talk at all about the fact that she doesn't want the things done, or that she and the Democrats, she's a part of the Democrats' whole playbook. She's the media arm of that operation, and she's going to do her best to stop any of these things from actually coming to fruition. She doesn't talk about that at all. She doesn't even act as if she's aware that this is happening. And that is, it's part of the insidious nature of what media are doing right now. You know, if you're partisan and you announce that in the name of your show and the topics that you discuss, and you tie all of it together, and it is just, you know, it is what it is, then at least people who are watching and listening are aware of what they're going to get, which is why I'm always surprised when someone says, please announce your political affiliation. I've had people email me, I listened to your show, and before I listen to it again, I want to know what your politics are. I'm like, well, it says Stacey on the right. I'm pretty sure that means I'm to the right of the middle, which means I'm a conservative. I'm a Republican. Yeah. So then when I say, obviously it's a conservative program, I've had one person say back, oh, I was just double checking because I wasn't sure. And the first thing I think is, oh, well, maybe you haven't encountered many black conservatives. And the second person said, well, I can't believe you're not presenting unbiased news as a reporter. And I'm like, well, I'm not sure who told you I was a reporter. I'm not a reporter. I have reporters on the program from all over, even the White House beat. We've had the privilege of having people from there on, and they report the news. I give the news and some commentary to go along with it from my perspective. Totally different thing. I'm also not employed by a major cable news network that purports to be a part of the fourth estate, like CNN. They purport to be a part of the media and the fourth estate, the journalistic part of our culture that brings forward news and information. Yet here's Allison Camerata gleefully, kind of, I'm not sure. She's basically saying, look, this could be really hard. This could be really difficult for the Republicans to do. And she couldn't sound happier about that. So the list that she rattles off, obviously it has infrastructure. It has the dreamers, as they call them, these grown folks who were brought here illegally, and some others. It's a big list. Here, let me give it to you. Trump's 2018 agenda, and this is according to CNN. Congress is now getting back to work, and they have to work on passing the government spending bill. Yeah, sure, they do. They really do. They should show the Democrats up by passing a spending bill. Dreamer program, so they need to call that amnesty, because that's what that is. Infrastructure program, that is something that the president promised from the campaign trail. I expect he's going to make a run at it, even with Mitch McConnell announcing that it can't be done. Children's health insurance program, that's something that they keep funding on a temporary basis that will have to be addressed because it's a political football that people like punting, kicking, and fighting over. And so that's why that's back up again. Repealing Obamacare. Well, he repealed the individual mandate. I, as a person, would like to see him repeal the Cadillac tax and then systematically dismantle it piece by piece, bit by bit, adding these, repeals of the different taxes that are associated with it into, in fact, it's kind of surprising, and I don't think I brought it up. I know I said they should attach the Cadillac tax repeal to the tax reform bill, but I'm kind of surprised they didn't actually take, basically because it's a tax reform bill, that they didn't repeal all of the taxes associated with Obamacare. But it's hard to get the government off of a cash cow. And those Obamacare taxes are a cash cow, taxing real estate transactions and your health insurance benefits, like your medical devices, taxing your HSA. I mean, they're just like, hey, is it moving? We can tax it. Is it not moving? Is it inanimate? Tax it. And then, then it's hard to get them to say, we don't need that. They never say that. Have you noticed that? So then they also have reform welfare and entitlement programs. Why do we need to reform welfare and entitlement programs the second year of the Trump presidency? Why do we need to do that? Well, I'll tell you why. Because reforms that were made in the 90s during the Clinton presidency were undone by President Obama. He took away the work requirement. He took away a whole bunch of the things that made welfare in this country sensible and a normal natural safety net. Obama just took them away. No logical explanation, no reasoning behind it, nothing except I need to create something for my successor to fight over with Congress, something that the American people will feel uncomfortable about, something that will make people question their loyalties to their party and whether or not people who don't work should be eating large and living large off of the backs of people who do work. Yeah, let me go ahead and change welfare for the worse, swell the rolls up, and make people who are able-bodied unable to go out and find jobs for themselves and take care of themselves, make them more dependent on government. Let me do that. So that's what he did. And that's why we have to now have, again, welfare reform. And then the entitlement programs, obviously, that's a misnomer. Social Security is not an entitlement program. If you're paying into it, it's not an entitlement. They should completely privatize it. But the Democrats will say that people like me who want to privatize it just want to push grandmothers off of cliffs, which couldn't be anything further from the truth. But please, by all means, keep lying. So the last item on CNN's list of to-dos for President Trump is for him to keep the GOP-controlled House and Senate. All right, that's true. He does need to do that. I don't know what legislative actions he needs to take to make that happen. That's mainly a function of answering the needs of the American people and governing effectively while two arms are tied behind his back because he's fighting the media on every front. So yeah, it's funny to see CNN put that up there on their little graphic. So you've got Tom Cole. And when I saw the title of this piece, the title of it is Dreamers Deserve Legal Status. The border wall is an obvious trade-off. Okay. So first of all, rhino alert about what you're about to hear next. Here's where he goes in on the Dreamer thing. And I skipped over the little part about the CHIP health insurance program for the needy kids because that's going to happen. We don't need to have Alisyn Camerota and some House rep, bat that back and forth. We know that's going to happen. They're going to reauthorize it. So get, moving on. So the next topic that she brought up to him, Alisyn Camerota brings up this Dreamers thing. And notice so tonight for the next 24 hours, do this for me. Just do this thing for me. Whenever someone talks about DACA, and you may not hear it at all, but you might hear it on the news, notice how the news presenter, news reader, talking head, media personality, whatever they are, the host, they always present it to whoever they're talking to, whether they're a Democrat or a Republican, as it's a given that these people need to be offered amnesty. They don't call it amnesty. Need to be given legal status because they were brought here against their will. So when you hear that, I want you to instantly think of all of the other children in the contiguous United States or any of our territories who are inconvenienced or negatively impacted by the actions of their parents, namely the children of incarcerated individuals. And then I'd like you to think to yourself, what programs exist for them? What government program gives a child whose both of their parents are currently incarcerated and they're in an orphanage somewhere or foster care getting bounced from home to home to home? Some of the homes great, some of them substandard. They're growing up basically without a tether to any one warm body. No one that is their blood cares for them in a personal way. What program do we have for them? What amnesty package do we have for them? When do we ever say these kids deserve some kind of extra dispensation because their parents have failed them? That's what the Democrats want you to think about when you hear about the DACA recipients. They were brought here against their will. A lot of kids experience the negative ramifications of illegal actions of their parents. And the only ones who deserve special laws and special considerations are kids from Mexico who were brought here against their will, quote unquote. that were brought here and they've experienced the largesse of the American people. And instead of them saying, you know what? I've been here for 25 years since I was a kid, and thank you so much. I got a free education. I even spent money on going to college and got an education in an American institution. And now that you found me out, I'm here illegally. Me and my parents are going to go back to my country of origin, and we'll make that a better place. Instead of them saying that, they're like, nah, we're going to stay right here and keep celebrating Cinco de Mayo. Like that's like a real thing. So notice, also unsaid in this clip, is that if the Dreamers are giving legal status, 13 levels of their family, 9 to 13 levels of their extended family will also be given legal status, swelling the numbers from 800,000 or so to multiple millions. We could have 5, 6, 7 million new American citizens if the Dreamers are legalized, because the first people they're going to ask to be legalized after they're legal is their mom and dad. Wouldn't you? If your mom and dad took you to the land of plenty and raised you in a country that was the best thing on earth, and then they were about to be deported and you were given legal status and you were allowed to choose some family members to come in legally with you when you choose your parents, of course you would. So that's what this is really about. The Democrats creating 5, 10 million new Democrats has zero to do with their love of Mexicans, people from Mexico, people who came across the border illegally, people who brought other people across the border illegally, you name it, it has nothing to do with that. So listen to the way she poses this question and then see how often they play this same exact line by line, word by word question, the way it's framed, the way it's positioned. Watch how often they do it this way. It's number 6.
Let's talk about the Dreamers, okay? Because that's another one that all sides say there needs to be a fix for these kids who were brought here through no choice of their own. But
exactly
if
right.
the president insists on funding an actual wall as part of this deal, Democrats say that they can't go along with that. So what's the simple fix?
Well, I don't know why you can't go along with border security. Look, on this one, that polls over 80%. People on all sides want it. We can disagree about the wall, but we had the largest increase in border security money in April in over a decade. We can do that again. And some places walls make sense, some places they may not, but we can make a big step in the right direction. And again, you know, I don't consider these young people a problem, but the issue with DACA is because you didn't have adequate border control in the first place. That's why you have all these young folks here, and they ought to get legal status in my view, but the obvious trade-off is stronger border security. President's right on that one. Democrats need to come around, or you know, they may decide they want a political issue, but in the meantime, we're putting hundreds of thousands of people at risk that, in my view, shouldn't be at risk.
They shouldn't be at risk. But I bet you the 450 to 550,000 children who are currently in the foster care system who don't have a mom or a dad to take care of them, I bet you they're sitting up wondering, when do I get a GOP rep to advocate for me? I'm not saying that we're not doing enough for them. I'm saying, where's their special carve out, their special program? Why are they as special, especially since the majority of those kids are black? Why aren't they as special as these illegal aliens? I said it. Now what? What you going to do? Email me? Go right ahead. StaceyOnTheRight@gmail.com. We'll be back with more right after this.
Hey, here's some great news, and we could all use some great news for 2018. If you're worried about your healthcare costs or you feel like you're missing out because open enrollment is over, well, it's not too late to join Medi-Share. You can sign up anytime, and think about this. The typical savings for a family with Medi-Share is about $500 a month. Think what a difference that would make to your budget. Again, that $500 a month is the typical savings. It could be more or less for you. Definitely worth taking a couple minutes to find out. There are over 300,000 Medi-Share members sharing each other's medical bills, and something they're now loving, Medi-Share has a telehealth program that lets you log in and meet with a doctor in real time within the comfort of your own home. For everything from a cold or flu or for a prescription, you can save a lot of time and money, and it's free. Again, open enrollment might be over, but you can still join Medi-Share. Here's the number to find out more. 855-PSALM-23. That's 855-PSALM-23. 855-PSALM-23.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
You know, when President Trump set forth his national security strategy, he omitted global climate change as a threat. 2 years earlier, President Obama elevated climate change as a top strategic risk in his strategy. The ongoing debate about the significance of climate change will continue for years to come. I contend that the debate is really about percentages. Consider people who often are labeled climate change deniers. Even these people believe the climate changed in the past. We've had an ice age and a medieval warming period. They just don't believe that human activity is the major driver for climate change. But they will usually admit that some small percentage of human activity might be influential. On the other side are people who are deeply concerned about climate change, but I doubt any of them believe that human activity is responsible for 100% of the change in the climate. We've had variations in the climate long before the Industrial Revolution, so really the debate is between percentages. Some believe the percentage is low, others believe it is higher. Sometimes the discussion is framed as a debate between those who believe in science, that is climate change, and others who are anti-science, the deniers. But consider this recent quote from geologist Ian Plimer, who believes in evolution and is anything but an anti-science proponent. He says climate change has taken place for thousands of millions of years. Climate change occurred before humans evolved on Earth. He says he cannot find any correlation between temperature change and human emissions of carbon dioxide. Therefore, he concludes that without correlation, there is no causation. Perhaps it is time to cool some of the rhetoric and consider what we know and don't know about climate change. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For more information about issues covered on Viewpoints, visit pointofview.net. Pointofview.net.
I don't need no stainless to be washed in his blood.
My fellow Utahns, for over 40 years I've had the great honor of serving as your senator. As many of you know, I came up during the Great Depression living in a ramshackle house built with recycled lumber from the local scrapyard. My parents gave us everything they had, but in the eyes of the world, we still didn't have much. Only in a nation like ours could someone like me, the scrappy son of a simple carpenter, grow up to become a United States Senator. As your senator, I've always sought to fight for those who could not fight for themselves. And I believe the results speak for themselves. I've authored more bills that have become law than any member of the Congress alive today. I played a central role in the creation of the modern generic drug industry, the passage of the landmark Americans with Disabilities Act, and the confirmation of every current member of the United States Supreme Court. Just last month, I helped lead the effort to pass historic comprehensive tax reform. One of my proudest legislative achievements is the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which guarantees vigorous religious liberty protections for all Americans. When the president visited Utah last month, he said I was a fighter. I've always been a fighter. I was an amateur boxer in my youth, and I brought that fighting spirit with me to Washington. But every good fighter knows when to hang up the gloves. And for me, that time is soon approaching. That's why, after much prayer and discussion with family and friends, I've decided to retire at the end of this term. Although I will miss serving you in the Senate, I look forward to spending more time with my family, especially my sweet wife Elaine, whose unwavering love and support made all of this possible. I'm deeply grateful for the privilege you've given me to serve as your senator these last 4 decades. I may be leaving the Senate, but the next chapter in my public service is just beginning. I want to thank you all for your support through these many years. May God bless you all.
And that was Senator Orrin Hatch announcing his retirement, which opens the door wide for Mittens Romney. Because I certainly didn't run his name into the ground and get upset enough the last time he tried to foist his leadership upon us. So, here we go. Round 3. He's back. I just don't understand how someone who's worth, $250 million, some outrageous sum, and he's like 40 grandkids. Like, he's won the grandkid lottery. He's rich. His wife is beautiful. And they have a gang of grandkids, wonderful kids, great grandkids, daughters-in-law, all that good stuff. Why can't he just go enjoy his family and stop trying to be in charge? Power. That's why he wants it. He's got to have it. And he feels like he's the de facto head of Never Trump. You know what that means. Open war on Mittens. If he decides to go in and he gets in there, it's going to be open war because he's going to go in there so he can stand up against President Trump. And I'm simply not going to have it. And neither are the rest of us. There's a reason why President Trump was elected. I'm happy about it. And if he's not happy about it, he should go be with his grandkids. That's the advice. Just like I'm telling Hillary Clinton, you have grandkids for a reason. Go be with them. Go be with them. Thank you. All right. Right now, it's my pleasure to welcome good friend of the show, author, senior contributor to Town Hall, and all-around rabble-rouser. When he's not stirring it up on Fox, he's stirring it up online and at his Town Hall columns, biting sarcasm and wit galore. You do not want to miss those. They come out every Sunday night. You can follow him on Twitter at Kurt Schlichter. It's Kurt Schlichter. Thanks for coming on today, Kurt.
Hey, thanks for having me, Stacey. You know, I really like to think of myself as the Steve Bannon who everyone doesn't hate, who doesn't always seem to lose, and who doesn't dress like a hobo such that other hobos come and give him money to help him out.
Well, I have to say that if those are the metrics by which we're measuring you, you are definitely that, because I know you're a pretty snappy dresser, and also with your military background, you know how to keep things dress right dress. You're very sharp, but I think the most sharp portion of what you do is the writing and continual kind of commentary that you provide on Twitter, where you're taking no prisoners, and it's not. I get what you're putting down. You're coming out for Steve Bannon. I see he's on the cover of Drudge today for making some really outlandish statements. What is going on there? Like, because I've never really been an anti-Steve Bannon. I've never really been in love with Steve Bannon. It's just been, hey,
then maybe you never met him.
No, I haven't ever met him. No, never.
Yeah. Look, I'm tired of people messing with the movement and taking us off on tangents because of their own personal agenda. Isn't that what spawned our movement? A bunch of people who were relied on to take care of things for us, and then we all had to get activated when it became clear they weren't going to.
True.
And, going and talking out of school to some writer to make yourself seem like a big shot, instead of focusing on important stuff like Donald Trump's and the administration's support of the people of Iran in throwing off their evil dictatorship, we're instead dealing with this, soon-to-be nobody, and because liberals love it when we go and attack each other. And I think those of us in the movement are tired of people putting their own personal interests ahead. Ooh, I'll get a headline. By going and getting in the way of the change that we need to make.
It really seems not just counterproductive, but almost like political suicide, because this is a guy who was actually in the White House for months and months and months, in the halls of power. He had the ear of the president. And as someone who's no longer there, those lines would still be open to him, or maybe the reason we're seeing the tantruming is because they're not open to him anymore. I mean, once you start putting yourself out there and getting yourself on the cover of Drudge for being a disturber of the peace, then people are going to speculate. I'm kind of thinking, has he been shut out? General Kelly says no more calls from Steve Bannon, and President Trump's like, okay, whatever. I don't care.
It could be for whatever reason. He felt it was important to draw attention to himself. He's been doing that again and again, jumping in. Trump's finally making getting the GOP establishment under control and getting him slowly but surely to move in his way. And then you got Bannon out there running around. I'm going to run primaries against everybody. Well, maybe we ought to say yes to the victory we're slowly gaining rather than not.
Yeah.
It's just I don't think any of us are going to tolerate it when somebody puts himself or herself over the needs of the movement. We're just not going to do it anymore.
Yeah,
it's not about him.
I'm tired of it.
He made it about him.
Well, and Kurt, I think one thing that's important to point out is when Kurt Schlichter's talking about the movement and all that, he's referring back to the early days of the Tea Party and time when you didn't really get a lot of positive attention. You didn't get any attention at all. It was a lot of door knocking and a lot of people, blogging and investigative reporting and people kind of putting down their day jobs so they could do this stuff or doing it in addition to their day jobs. Very little credit or recognition given. And those were the seeds of what we're experiencing right now. You can't have had a President Trump last year without the Tea Party movement way back when. So these things are not separate little balls spinning around. They're all connected. And to see Steve Bannon coming out with these kinds of wild, really irresponsible statements that give real ammunition to the Democrats, it's kind of like spitting in the face of those people who were there back then, who worked back then, and everyone who's come since, people have lost personal livelihoods, good things that they had that were valuable to them. They've lost kind of on the altar of trying to get the country back in its proper place.
They have, and I just don't. It just doesn't strike me that Steve Bannon and some other folks out there really think that that's important. They instead think that they are important, and you don't put yourself ahead of the movement if you really believe in it. We want to restore the Constitution to its preeminence in American life. That's going to take sacrifice, and sometimes the sacrifice is passing up opportunities to get attention for yourself because it will hurt the movement overall. Absolutely. And I just don't think he's done that. And and I'm glad that, unequivocally, even the commenters on Breitbart are allegedly just taking him apart. Going, what the heck are you doing?
I think that's appropriate. I mean, I skimmed through the headlines. I was like, I'm just going to give this a few minutes to see if this actually, is this right? What could this be about? And then in addition to that, that's not the only news. I don't know if you saw this, Kurt, but apparently the Clinton house in Chappaqua, New York, it's been on fire. They're putting it out. Yeah, the house itself is on fire. Now, the Clintons aren't there, first of all. They're not there. Bill and Hillary aren't living together.
Well, they're not there together, that's for sure.
No, they're not living together anymore. Now that she's finished the book, the house next door that they remodeled, that she used to write the book in, and the original house, these are both places that they served a purpose for her to be elected to the Senate from New York. Now that they don't need that anymore, they're not there anymore. But for some reason, the house has caught fire. All I'm seeing every which way I look is people saying they're destroying evidence. Do they need to burn the house down to destroy evidence, Kurt?
Well, why take any chances?
Well, I don't know. I don't understand this thought process, but you deal with criminals because you're an attorney. So I'm trying to get an understanding here.
Yeah, I think it's more likely faulty wiring.
Yeah.
I just don't see the... Maybe they're hoarding papers up there. I don't know. It's just... what else is going to happen today? It's only the third day of the year.
I know. I'm looking at the pictures, and obviously this is a fancy neighborhood. This is not some ramshackle little shack that's been set on fire. This is a really nice home, and the police and everybody's already out there, and they're the fire is not at the main residence. It could be the next door property they bought last year or another structure. So there are a lot of buildings in the area, and apparently something has caught blaze, and it's been put out now.
Well, I'm glad no one was hurt.
That's what I said. I mean, we knew the Clintons weren't there, but I'm glad none of their servants or lackeys were there.
Yeah, don't want to have any of the minions injured.
So let's talk about DACA. I've been ripping and railing on this idea that the Republicans have to legalize these 800,000 people. I understand the optics aren't good, but without the wall, why should we even have that conversation?
I think President Trump, who has a finger on the pulse of this movement, although everybody says he is the movement, and that's just not so. I mean, people ignored him in Alabama. People ignored him in Virginia. When they want to do something else, they will. I think he understands that the people want what the people want, and his supporters do not want DACA, period. And if they're going to get DACA jammed down their throats, they better get really good stuff in return, like a wall. And I see him moving towards that. And look, I don't see DACA as our problem. I'm not here illegally. My wife's not here legally. She's here legally. It's not our problem, so I don't feel that I need to rush to solve it, nor do I feel that I should just solve it without getting something in return. Why am I going to allow 800,000 or more people to be here when they broke the law coming here or their parents broke the law? What's in it for me? And I don't think that's an unfair question to ask, and I think Donald Trump is smart enough to ask that. Now, if they come back and say, okay, you're getting the wall, you're getting this kind of border enforcement stuff, you're getting an E-Verify, you're getting an end to chain migration, we're going to get rid of the visa lottery. Those are real achievements. At that point, I start going, okay, all right, maybe we can make a deal. I'm giving up some I don't want to give up, but I'm getting a lot of things I did want to get up. Now, Democrats, of course, think we're morally obligated to do it without getting anything in return. To which case, to which I have to reply, what kind of idiot listens to a moral analysis from a Democrat?
Exactly. Okay, so Kurt, you made it some really good points there, especially about the ending of the chain migration. I can't agree with you more, but so President Trump is the one who has all the stones, if you know what I mean. He's the one with the backbone. He's the one with the will to not cave to these people. Now, Nancy Pelosi and was it Chuck Schumer, I think, met with him, and they said, oh, he agreed to everything we said, which I believe was a lie. That was a marketing ploy on their part so they can make themselves look like the victims when he comes in, which is what he's done already, and said he needs the wall funding. But it's beyond that. I really feel like we should go for the whole kit and caboodle, because I agree with you. Not only am I not here illegally, I don't know anybody who's here illegally. And even if I did, that's not my concern. I made the point last segment that there are just hundreds of thousands of American children whose parents both are incarcerated, or one is incarcerated and the other one's strung out on drugs. They have no one to take care of them, and we don't have special carve-outs or programs for them. They're in foster care. They're being taken care of by the largesse of the American taxpayers, but that's about it. They don't get special laws. So why should these people who are here illegally get special laws, and then once they're legalized, get to bring in, as you pointed out, through chain migration, their parents, their grandparents, all their cousins, their sisters, anybody who'll marry any of their relatives? Why do we allow that? That's an extra 5 million people or so.
Yeah, I don't. No, we just can't do any of that. And I know there are some Republicans out there who want, compliant, low-wage workers who will toil without complaint for them because, American workers demand their rights and everything. Well, too bad. I'm not here to make rich Republican donors richer. If you guys want workers, pay for them. The answer is not to import replacements for Americans. As for Democrats, I just want Democrats votes. Not one dreamer will ever vote Republican.
26.
Absolutely.
That's
well,
a fact.
You've been fantastic as usual. Happy New Year, Kurt. Thank you for coming on today. At Kurt Schlichter on Twitter and townhall.com for the columns. We'll be right back with more.
Stacey Washington.
And so to this day, I don't eat green beans. If they bring me a plate of food at a restaurant and they've substituted green beans for some other vegetable because the other vegetable is out of season, I will make them bring me a saucer and remove the green beans from my plate and take them off of the table because I cannot abide green beans. And so Chuck Schumer and the Democrats have to sit down to the table and it's loaded up high with green beans, and they have to stay there until they've eaten them all. That's the table they set. They boiled the green beans, they picked them, they snapped them, they put them into the steamer, they've cooked them, they seasoned them with salt and pepper, and now they're on the table with a little side of butter, and that's all they're getting, and they're going to have to eat these until they win.
Stacey on the Right. Weekday afternoons at 2 Central on Urban Family Talk.
Please call your senators today. It's time to put an end to the liberals' filibuster. Tell your senators to switch to a majority vote and defund Planned Parenthood now. Call the Capitol Switchboard at 202-224-3121 or go to afaaction.net. Again, call 202-224-3121 and tell your senators to switch to a majority vote and defund Planned Parenthood. Your call will make a difference.
Victory McIntosh.
Early will I seek thee, O Lord. Man, it's something about when you start your morning off right with Abba Father. I'm telling you, will the enemy come? Of course, he's going to do his job. But it should motivate you even more. Man, I got to stay connected to the vine of Jesus. How do you do that? By getting into the Word of God. You got to do it.
Tune in to Word on the Street with Victory McIntosh. Saturdays at 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. Central on Urban Family Talk.
Yo, what's up?
Hey, what's nothing much, man. Just trying to listen to this last song for the music final.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna fail for the most part. I haven't even listened to it.
Ugh, yeah, me neither. I've been too busy listening to The Word on the Street.
The Word on the Street?
Wait, you guys haven't heard?
No, I haven't heard of
not
it.
me.
Not that one.
Well, check this out.
There is only one true word, and that is the Word of God, which is what you will hear on Word on the Street, hosted by me, Victory McIntosh. Tune in as we discuss some of the latest hot topics and life issues and filter them all through the holy Word of God. It is possible to live righteous before the Lord and enjoy doing it. Tune in Saturday mornings at 9 Central Time. You don't want to miss it.
Sometimes I wonder if you're really listening, or if all of my words are just leaving my mouth floating up in the air. I've been told that I'm crazy, putting all of my faith into the arms of somebody. I spend nights awake wondering if we stay.
Oh my goodness. It is always a pleasure to be with you live and direct on the radio, on Facebook, on the live stream, on the app, on Google Play, on iTunes, and in your ears, whatever way I can get in there. I'm happy to be here. Happy New Year to you. It's a pleasure to also welcome our next guest to the program, Rafael Mangual. He's a lawyer and a trained attorney, a public policy expert, and he also writes over at The Hill. And his piece about reciprocity it caught my eye. I retweeted it, and they reached out and said, hey, we can come on and talk about that. And I was like, yes, I love experts. I love good guests for the program, and I love being able to have them come on and talk about their work. So Rafael, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Stacey. It's a pleasure to be with you.
It is always good for me when I see somebody who's writing cogently about the Second Amendment. I write about it, and I really love people who just understand that this isn't about militias or sports or any of that stuff. It's really about something it's so ingrained in American culture that foreigners can't understand it. They call it an obsession with guns. They call it really anything. But what they don't understand is that we have a right and we know it, and we're not willing to let it go.
That's right. I mean, a lot of people talk about the gun issue, so emotionally, based on their own intuitions and biases, and unfortunately, good writing about, Second Amendment issues are rare, and that's why I think you have so much misunderstanding, particularly on the left and even in the United States, about what that amendment really means and what the scope of those rights are and why they're important to American life.
So your piece, which is over at thehill.com, is states have a constitutional duty to recognize gun rights nationwide. Now, I tweeted it out already. I'll have it up on the Facebook page in a few minutes after the show is over. You wrote this piece. Let me make sure I give proper credit here. It's also George Moxery and you both wrote this together, your opinion contributors. I also contribute over at The Hill for opinions. And so it's always... Yeah, it's really great to have access to their viewers or their readers. So you're talking about national concealed carry reciprocity and the bill that the House of Representatives passed. And you're basically calling this an essential constitutional duty for states to pass this. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so... it's really interesting. We've got this national reciprocity bill, and conservatives have been running on this for a really long time. It's really frustrating when, you live in the United States of America and you think that as a United States citizen you're supposed to have access to certain rights, and it turns out that in practice that really depends on what state you live in. So I now live in New York. I lived for a few years in Illinois. And I became a gun owner in Illinois. And when I decided to move to New York to take a job, which is something that's very common nowadays for people to move from state to state throughout their career to follow, whatever it is that they want to do professionally. Found out that there was no way that I could actually move from Illinois into New York with giving up my firearms. And that was what first really sparked my interest in the law on this stuff, and I was still in law school at the time. And so, I started looking into this, and it turns out that, states actually have a duty to recognize your rights, irrespective of how they feel about it, if those rights are guaranteed by the Constitution. And so on the left, we've got a lot of these, what I like to call fair-weather federalists, people who don't care about federalism until it suits them, who are saying that, national reciprocity basically, stomps on states' rights, in an attempt to appeal to those of us on the right or who call ourselves conservatives. But the fact of the matter is that argument ignores that federalism refers to powers that are reserved to the states, powers that the federal government does not have. But Congress explicitly has authority, in this case under Section 5 of the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, to pass legislation to enforce that amendment's terms. So the question becomes what rights does that amendment protect? And the Supreme Court told us back in a famous case in McDonald versus City of Chicago. That court held that under the 14th Amendment, the Second Amendment is incorporated as enforceable against the states, which means that no matter how California or New York feel about your right to carry a pistol, they have to abide by the Constitution. And so Congress actually does have the authority to pass this kind of legislation, and states will, if it is passed, have to recognize it.
Okay, and so when you talk about moving to New York and not being able to take your guns, so just so people can understand, because so I live in Missouri, and I mean, we have a lot of freedom here for the Second Amendment. We have a lot of freedom, and it's a very welcoming environment for gun owners here in the state of Missouri. But we are right next to sharing, the lines there with Illinois, where just having your gun and your bullets in the same compartment in your car that's a crime. And so we have to be careful. If you're in Missouri and you're just freewheeling with your concealed carry, you can't just drive over into Illinois without stopping and making some changes to the way you're carrying your firearms. But you're talking about moving from Illinois to New York. What specifically was this, like, why would you have to get rid of your firearms? What is it that what problem did they have with you owning guns?
The way New York works is they actually have a scheme for allowing you to exercise your right. So I can become a gun owner in New York, but in order to do that, I have to go through an application process. And that application process is open only to residents of New York, which means that I can't start the application process until I'm in the state. And so when I found out that I was going to move to New York, I, called the police department to ask, what process I had to undergo in order to be able to, start the application for my move so that I didn't have to sell any of my firearms. And they said, no, there is no option for you. You can't apply until you come into the state and establish residency. And you can establish residency with guns from another state. So, that's really what it came down to, is just the fact that there was no of the permit that I had acquired.
Okay, so just making sure that I'm understanding.
It turns out that this is actually another way if states might be violent.
You're cutting out just a little bit, but from what I'm understanding, you're saying that so you would have to store your firearms with someone else.
Invalidated.
Right? You'd have to store the firearms with someone else and then move into the state, establish residency, apply to have firearm ownership, and then you could bring your guns in. I hate it when we have cell phone issues. I think we're having cell phone issues. I can't hear him, and I'm not sure if he can hear me. And I think the point that he was going to make is that, so you have these states with these laws. What New York's law effectually does is it disarms any person who moves into the state. And then when they apply for this, special dispensation to be a gun owner, then the state can, by de facto, they can say how many guns do you own. You say none, then they can, I guess, say, okay, you can have this many guns, or et cetera, et cetera. No matter how you look at it, that's wrong. That's an infringement on the Second Amendment. So yeah, they're not the only state. Maryland does a lot of things to try to infringe on the rights of their citizens to own guns. There are a number of states, California, a number of states that do these things, and the intention is to stop you from owning firearms and to make it difficult for you, thereby kind of, a lot of people don't like a lot of resistance, so they'll just say, well, I mean, I need to move. I got work that I got to start, so I'll just, I'll sell these. I'll, gift them to a relative, whatever. I got to get these out of my ownership so I can move on. That's wrong. So I want to go over a little bit more of his piece. Oh, okay. Looks like we have him back for a few minutes.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem. I was just complaining about the whole, you never know when the phones are going to act up. It's cold weather, it's hot weather, it's rain, it's blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
That's right.
So you were explaining about the whole process, and so if I'm understanding this correctly, you can't own the guns coming in. So you basically have to leave them with a family member or sell them, then move in and then reacquire them or go pick them back up, or what?
Exactly. And that really raises the transaction costs, of doing that, especially if you don't know anyone in the state, or if you don't know anyone in the state that you want to move from, that you feel comfortable leaving firearms with. And so what a lot of people end up doing is just selling their firearms altogether. And so the question is can a state law be valid if it requires you to essentially give up a right in order to exercise another one? And the other right at issue here is your right to move from state to state. One of the things about federalism is that, the way it's exercised is by what we call voting with your feet. And so if you can't actually move, or if the government places a burden on your decision to move, then it's violating the Constitution by violating your right to move between and among the several states. And so that, those are ways that the 14th Amendment is implicated here, which is why I think Congress actually does have the authority to pass reciprocity legislation, and why states will have to legally recognize that legislation if and when it goes through.
And we absolutely must. What I'm hopeful for is that the Republicans will be very excited about doing this, because it's something that the president mentioned when he was at the NRA annual meetings last year. It's also something that, so you've got multiple millions of people who own firearms in this country, and I think it would be a real boost for the 2018 midterms if they were able to get this done.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And, so far there seems to be some momentum. The National Reciprocity Act of 2017 passed the House just at the tail end of last year. So hopefully the Senate will take it up, and we'll have that right restored for those millions of Americans that are law-abiding gun owners.
So how would that work with New York's laws? I mean, do we have any idea of how that, because you're an attorney, so you could obviously understand this much better than I could. How would that impact their current laws, which basically say you can't bring a gun into New York unless you have residency there?
Right, well, that will essentially invalidate them. It'll subordinate them, right? So the Supremacy Clause of the Constitution says that, the Constitution prevails over conflicting state laws when the federal government has authority to act. And so a state like New York and California and states that have been historically anti-gun will essentially have to figure out a way to comply with this sort of legislation. There are different ways they can do that. There may be, sort of a grace period that they'll give people who can, sort of bring their firearms with them, and then within a certain time, make sure that they apply to the state's process if they want to have a more vigorous process. But at the end of the day, this is really the federal government's purview. I mean, up until now, they've left this to the states, but they can take it up at any time, and they're the boss.
Well, I'm excited about the possibility. My hope is that the Republicans are going to have kind of like a locomotive action where they start off with a couple of good things. They still have some steam left over from passing the tax reform bill, which Americans are still finding out just how untrue the things that the Democrats have said about it really are. And so continuing on with that, just using that momentum to get concealed carry reciprocity done, to get the repeal of Obamacare done, the full repeal, and to get the infrastructure package on the way, the budget done, the whole kit and caboodle. There's no reason why they can't get it all done. They're in power.
That's right. I mean, I think a lot of Americans, especially American gun owners, have been somewhat frustrated with, the legislative victories that we've gotten, in the sense that, the last few elections and midterms have been great for getting people in the House and Senate who are pro-gun, but we haven't yet yielded much fruit from that, so hopefully that'll start to change.
Fantastic. Well, I want to say thanks for coming on the show today. We will have you back and your co-author on this piece to discuss these issues. I love when we have a good expert, especially someone who's pro-Second Amendment. We need more of that. And so we'll be talking to you again soon. Happy New Year, Raphael. Thank you so much for your time today.
Happy New Year, and thanks so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
All right. Talk soon. This is fantastic, you guys. I'm always excited. And they actually reached out to me because I shared their story online. The two authors said, hey, you know, if you ever need to have us come on and talk, we would love to. I was like, yeah. And so we had a cancellation for today. We're going to have Phil Kerpen of American Commitment on, I think it's Friday or Monday, one or the other. And so since he had to change his day from today, we were able to squeeze in Raphael, who had the time to come on and chat with us, which was fantastic. So really, really happy about that. So lots more to come tomorrow on the program. I'll give you a little preview. Let's see, do we have guests scheduled for tomorrow? Oh, but we do. Kayleigh McEnany, national spokesperson for the Republican National Committee. She'll be on. And then Jesse Kelly, contributor to The Resurgent. You know, he's a Marine Corps veteran, and he's always a really good interview. Fun to talk to him. So we'll have those two people on the show tomorrow. We'll have the continuation of the ordering of our time and the importance of us not wasting our days. There's more that I have for you on that. It's going to be really, really great. So definitely share with someone who might be talking about this, because it's always this time of year where I always think to myself, to be quite honest with you, I always fantasize about getting one of those professional organizers to come over and reorganize a whole bunch of stuff. And then I look and see how much they cost, and I think, I just need to organize this myself. And so you get started and you get maybe one part of one room organized, or maybe you get a whole room organized, and then that's it until it gets brought up again. So I got to do better than that. But just having the conversation and connecting it to God's word is, I feel like leaps and bounds is the proper foundation for getting it done. And so I'm excited to share more about that with you tomorrow. So have a blessed evening and get so much done, and relaxing and resting as well. Stacy on the Right, stacyontheright.com. Thanks, everybody.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast do not necessarily reflect those of Urban Family Talk, Urban Family Communication,